Right, so I guess we're going to have to talk about the horrible, depressing, and incredibly familiar and predictable discourse surrounding Manchester City at the moment. Of course, everyone continues to hate us. Of course, everyone continues to ignore inconvenient truths and essentially be very hypocritical as long as they get their twopence worth and get their digs in at Manchester City Football Club. It's been a tiring and miserable 24 hours as everyone has piled in on Manchester City Football Club yet again following the postponement of Manchester City's game against Everton. I'll be honest with you guys, I'm kind of tired of it. I'm kind of tired of everyone absolutely losing the collective minds, all in the aim of a few clicks and a few retweets just to get their hot takes out into the world, when really the simple take always would have been, oh, some City players have tested positive and some staff. That's a shame. I'm gutted the game's abandoned, but I hope they get well, and I'm sure the Premier League did it in good faith. End of take. It really is as simple as that. But of course, the internet does not want to let things lie as simply as that, because for whatever reason, we all think we're more important than we are. I guess I'm including myself in this as well. But sometimes alternative takes aren't necessarily needed just to be pertinent and stand out in a crowd. Sometimes you can just call a spade and admit that maybe, just maybe, we're in the middle of a global pandemic, and the actions that have been taken were necessary to protect not only Everton players, not only Manchester City players, not only Everton's coaching team, Manchester City's coaching team, but also the staff involved on a match day, also the media team and everyone else involved. When I went to Manchester City's game against Liverpool as part of their We're Not Really Here show, which was absolutely fantastic, I also found out that day that there was around 200 people active and working around the Etihad campus to make that game actually happen due to the COVID lockdown and everything we're going through at the moment. That's around 200 people. That's an awful lot of people. So the idea that they're only trying to protect Manchester City players and Everton players is of course nonsense. The club and the Premier League have taken this decision because they need to protect this from spreading further and risking people's lives, quite literally risking people's lives. And I'm so tired that once again people can't see past this simple fact because they try and push their own personal agenda. Take Gary Neville, for example. Gary Neville yesterday, usually a relatively measured pundit, was very quick to essentially tweet about Manchester City's game against United potentially being postponed to get United a bye through to the next round, which is just... it's disingenuous nonsense and totally ignoring the rules and the precedents set out against the competition. Now, if you don't know, of course, Leyton Orient, unfortunately, couldn't field a team against Spurs, and unfortunately they forfeited a game in the Carabao Cup earlier on this season, which saw a bye for Spurs into the next round. Now, of course, if Gary Neville had done his job as a very well-paid pundit, seriously, the guy's very fucking rich, then maybe, just maybe, he would have known that the rules stated that, unfortunately, due to the short time between rounds, there was no convenient time for both teams to rearrange the fixture, so they had nothing they could possibly do to get that game played. Whereas in Manchester City, the next round is not until April. Literally April. So they've got all this time. They've got basically nearly 4 full months to complete this fixture. Why can't people just engage their brain for once, read the rules and address this fairly? Of course, so it didn't matter. At this point, everyone had already ran with this idea and everyone was saying Manchester City shouldn't play the game against United. United should go through. Of course, they fed the trolls and gave them a convenient excuse once again to paint Manchester City as the big bad wolf who's ruining everything. Now, I'm not going to pretend Man City are perfect. Of course not. But the idea that we would somehow manipulate the pandemic as well, this whole theory that everyone's been feeding into just to get a rest for some players, is incredibly patronising. And one, it's also incredibly offensive to people around the club who've had family affected by it, none other so than our manager Pep Guardiola, who lost his mum to this global pandemic. It's incredibly embarrassing and incredibly offensive to insinuate that somehow the club and Guardiola would be complicit in manufacturing some false circumstances where City would just conspire to get the game cancelled by lying about this. I'm sorry, it's absolutely embarrassing, and many people who've implied this should be hanging their heads in shame. And I wouldn't be surprised as well if City didn't get in touch and pursued legal matters, because it's absolutely embarrassing. Obviously as well, one of the other big complaints is that apparently the rules stated that if you had 14 fit players, the games would have to go ahead. Now, it turns out that those rules aren't actually in paper or written down anywhere. Literally, as no one has produced an example of this being in the rules, where initially it turns out that maybe this was just guidance from the Premier League, but it would be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. So once again, all those frothing at the mouth, trying to once again blame Manchester City for being evil, big and rich and successful, basically, if we're being honest. You're talking nonsense. There is zero rules that state that definitively a game will has to go ahead unless they have 14 fit players. It's an old law apparently related to other things, but it's not the COVID guidelines. And in case you missed it, by the way, the idea of this whole thing going ahead is not just to protect City players. It's to protect, once again, Everton players. The idea that you can just get those players and staff out of the way and everyone's going to be fine is absolutely naive and nonsensical. Come on. People going as well have said, no, it's the reason Everton, and that statement, in my opinion, by the way, was appallingly worded and naive and offensive, if anything. But fair enough. But the reason people are complaining, apparently, is because they only gave Everton a few hours' notice. I'm sorry, lads. Man City didn't make the fixture schedule, unfortunately. It's not City. We can't give you a week's notice, can we? When quite literally, this is a disease that takes a few days to show symptoms and City are playing 2 games back to back. Do you not realise how these things work? We can't predict the future. We can't force a positive test a week earlier to have those games cancelled. And even if we had, it still would have then been closer to the previous game that we played due to the tight, congested fixture schedule. Has everyone just lost their collective mindset? Or is everyone genuinely, will they do anything and say anything just to paint Manchester City in a bad light? I mean, once again, what more could City have done to let Everton know any quicker? Chances are, the day after the Newcastle game, they basically had the test. Then it took 24 hours maybe to get the results back, which was then in front of the game. I know for a fact that Manchester City's media team and all that were ready to do their shows as usual, ready to go ahead and do all their coverage. Everyone was ready to do their jobs until the last minute change. I'm sorry, there's no conspiracy here. City aren't conspiring to do this just to get a few rest for their players. They are certainly not going to shut down their training ground for 2 weeks to do a deep clean, remove all the preparation, pile up our own fixture schedule just to rest a few players, are they? This affects Manchester City more than it affects Everton. I guarantee you. All of a sudden, Manchester City are facing an incredible fixture log potentially in the winter months of February and so on, and up to March and April towards the end of the season. All of a sudden, City are still in the Carabao Cup, by the way. We're obviously going for a Premier League title. It might not happen, but we're clearly going for it. We're in the Champions League. We'll probably be in the FA Cup still. This is not going to get easier. The season is already condensed anyway. So the idea that City are trying to manipulate this doesn't make sense because they're making it worse for themselves. Can people for 1 second, please? Also, I'll ask for you, engage your brain, remove tribalism and think about it logically. What you're implying if you think City have done anything wrong is that City aren't putting health of players and staff and everything else first, which is offensive. City are trying to manipulate a global pandemic for their own gain, which is offensive to not only everyone who works at the club, but also to Guardiola, who lost his own mother to the disease. And 3, you're also forgetting this happened before as well with Aston Villa, and no one gave a shit then. But why do they give a shit now? It's silly. I know you may hate Manchester City if you're watching this as an opposing fan or someone else, but not everything is Manchester City doing something wrong. I guarantee you, if this was Spurs, there would not be the furore around it. I know everyone hates Man City, but for once, think that maybe this is not about you. Maybe this is not about me. Maybe this is just about that goddamn awful global pandemic that is sweeping the world at the moment. Can we once all be mature about these things and stop presuming that everything City do is part of some evil mechanisms to try and control the Premier League? I don't doubt Man City have been pretty dodgy occasionally. Who knows? Maybe Liverpool have, maybe City have, maybe United have in terms of, I don't know, financial stuff at some point in the past. I'm not going to deny that. But to manipulate a pandemic right now just to get a few days off from rest of the players, it doesn't make any sense and it's offensive and I'm tired of it. I'm genuinely tired of everyone losing their collective minds to essentially who can outdo each other for the most stupid hot takes possible. I'm sorry, it's hypocritical nonsense. It's always easily disproved nonsense, and it lacks basic research and it lacks basic etiquette. We're in a global fucking pandemic. Of course, every now and then things are going to shift last minute, but it's not anyone's fault. And can we also, while we're at it, please stop this victim shaming? I've seen people suggest that Manchester City should be fined or basically deducted points for not controlling COVID spread within the squad. Are you genuinely for real? Is that genuinely fair? Do you not realise how many people are catching COVID by just doing their jobs and doing absolutely zero wrong? We need to stop this victim-shaming nonsense. This is a very easily catchable respiratory disease, virus, in a country that is absolutely ridden with it, unfortunately. The coronavirus is everywhere currently in the UK, and particularly in the Northwest as well. It's very, very, very plausible that Manchester City players just did their job, got on with it, and unfortunately caught the virus anyway. It's very plausible they caught it in London, or they caught sorted because one person came a bit too close to a player who was popping to the shops, or they caught it literally off a surface or anything like that. There's nothing to say they did anything wrong, and you can't punish people for getting ill. I'm sorry, it's absolute nonsense. It's weird behaviour, and I'm tired of it. This correct response should have been, once again, that's a shame, I'm gutted, but I hope everyone's okay. I'm sure we'll get it sorted. The end.